Today I interview Peter Good, a Connecticut-based designer from Cummings & Good, the design firm he co-owns with his wife Janet Cummings Good. In terms of logos, Peter is best known for the mark he created for the now defunct NHL team, the Hartford Whalers. But he has created logos for scores of local and international organizations over the course of his career. His impact on the Connecticut design landscape is large. For me personally, Peter has been a hero, a mentor, and a friend. His love of art, music, and theater, and of all of those around him, can be seen in how he approaches his craft. How he infuses humor and humanity into his designs made a lasting impact on how I approach my own work. I had the distinct pleasure of working alongside Peter and Jan early in my career. They taught me you could be successful in design not by being pretentious, but by always starting out a project by being human, by being curious and open to unconventional ways of solving a problem. I'm humbled to be able to sit down and talk to Peter today on Logos Over Lunch. I'm going to start with a quote from a designer I interviewed a while ago. And this was their answer about sort of the design process. The idea of clear communication is more important than creativity, cleverness, and skills. It should be the fundamental driving force for every design. And what that means is being able to express an idea, being open for other ideas, being able to articulate visual ideas that someone else can understand. Something that does not need explanation, a theory, a rationale, or whatever. You agree or disagree with that kind of a statement?
Well, no, it all sounds wonderful, and I don't disagree with it, except that as soon as you come up with rules and a doctrine to follow, form follows function, small is better, and all those. As soon as you do that, you eliminate a whole way of thinking that's much more open than that. So, I mean, I think I like to think that there's a broader way of looking at design, because in spite of the fact that I've talked about people that don't know about typography and so forth, there's always a chance that an amateur that knows nothing about design has a fundamental understanding of what might work that is missed by professionals. Because the problem with professionalism is that it sets up certain things that you eliminate immediately. You know, if you're into simplicity, then anything that's complex, you don't even consider. And I think that's a mistake. That's a mistake. That's why as a designer, I was never able to adopt a concrete philosophy, like say Paul Rand, who I respect a lot, and I respect so much of his thinking, but not always. Not always. I mean, sometimes something absolutely almost seems almost crude in a way, amateurish, could be very, very effective, depending on the situation. So no, I don't agree. I don't disagree with that idea of an approach to design. I mean, design could be incredibly thoughtful, analytical, but it also could be spontaneous and with no rationale at all. It comes from some deep intuition that you have about something, a feeling. You know, the idea that form, the shape of something, could actually have a message that's beyond explanation, that's beyond objective thinking. Unfortunately, the people that we mostly work with, corporations and institutions, rely on that left brain rationale. So many times I've had to create the rationale after I knew something was going to work. in the language they would understand and be influenced by.
Right.
This is good for your bottom line because your stockholders, blah 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 blah, because that's what appeals to most of the population that we work for.
Right.
Uh,
Well, that was a trick question, by the way, because I'm really happy the way you answered it, because you know the openness and how you approach things now, because the person who said that was this guy.
oh, really? Oh, that was very sneaky of you. What is that from? What is that from? And who is
I found this. Okay.
that?
This was a project that I did at UConn as a student. I came to your office and interviewed you, and then
Oh,
I had to lay it out as a design, as a like a spread to a magazine. And so all these questions were answered. I found this I still have my portfolio. It's like in my closet. And I mean, I remember and then I think I came and interviewed with you guys.
did I say that statement was brilliant, by the way? Well, I didn't disagree with it, though.
No, you didn't. You didn't. You didn't vehemently disagree at all. That's funny though, because I remember when I showed this to you, you're like, oh, that's nice, and because I did it all in sewing, because I think I found some pieces that you had sewn, and you're like, well, I don't do that all the time, and then I was like, I started to get red, and then you looked at the Strathmore logo, which I don't know, I had found it. It was like knocked out. You probably can't even see it. It was a knocked out version.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
And that's exactly, look I can see you reacting to it already. I can see you reacting to it already. You're like cringing. You're cringing. And I remember, because I found it that way. I didn't do the reversal. I found it that way somewhere, and I put it on there. And then you're like,
Well,
that was like, all of a sudden you were like, you looked at it, you put it up. How, that logo's not supposed to be used in reverse. I'm like, I'm sitting there, I'm like 20 years old, like about to start crying.
Oh, that's funny. That is very, very funny, Chris. I was just going through one of your preliminary questions was which logos do you like? That happens to be one of my favorites. I shouldn't say one of my favorites. Favorites. There's a whole range of criteria that you could adapt why you like a certain logo. That happens to be one, though, that I think optically and functionally work together. They did.
But how do you start, and then iteration wise, how does a logo develop?
Okay. Well, before even putting a pencil to paper, the important thing is to understand who you're doing it for, what they expect, and sit down and have a conversation. Do they really need an identity would be the most basic question, I suppose. Why do you need a new identity? Or is it a new company, or is it a changing company, or your product lines have changed so much? To try to understand that, and then to define the requirements. And this is usually people, from my experience, people tend to want everything put in a logo. Well, we don't want to lose our old customers, so we want something traditional, but yet we want to be cutting edge. Wait a minute, and we do this. All our divisions do different things, so we want to be able to express all that we do. Tell a story about our corporation, and those are all much too complex for a logo. So we have to come to an agreement, first of all, with that, and then very simply, I mean, there's all kinds of steps to go in between that, but I start with arbitrary, and anything that comes to my mind, unscreened, I start putting the words down that have to accompany a logo. I start thinking about form, and just fill up page after page of rough ideas, even knowing that they're terrible ideas, but I get them down. You know, there's something, and I still believe in this. In fact, I was just reading something on BBC News, the merit of handwriting notes rather than taking them on a keyboard. And they talk about the hand-brain complexity. And they went into scientific explanation of neural passages and all this stuff. But I've always felt that there was some connection between that. So your hand is operating almost independently from your analytical mind, your cognitive mind. And so I put down everything. Then I might review them, and it's important to leave them too, because very rarely do you sit down and come up with a brilliant idea right away. I mean, I suppose if I went through, maybe I could come up with a few examples where it came rather quickly. In some assignments, is much easier because it's so specific what you're doing, you know. But like say the Connecticut River Museum, you know, you have the Connecticut River, you have it's nautical based, you know, so it's a pretty narrow area, and which makes it easier to read. It's what I used to call graphically rich. There's so many things you could put down. But other things, particularly like in the financial industry, insurance companies and banking, you know, they're just very arcane, and it's kind of hard to do it. So maybe you're concentrating on typography there, you know. So you keep on reaching and searching, and then leaving it. And you know, quite often, particularly Jan, it's 2 a.m. She'll wake up, oh, you know, and come up with an idea, or and the same thing happens to me. You know, I'll come back after feeling like I'm exhausted. I can't come up with another idea, and then somehow, in some period, your mind is still working, and you just put down something that you hadn't thought of before, and it becomes something that's significant, you know. So, and we all hope for that. And I've always wondered if there was a way to conjure that moment, to be able to consciously create that moment of complete freedom and relaxation, yet engaged, you know. And for me, it comes right in that, usually in that twilight, just before sleep, but you're not asleep, but your mind is like, I don't know, seems to be very, very fluid and relaxed, but yet engaged too at the same time, you know. But it's hard to say, sit down at your drawing table, everything ready, and say, okay, now I'm going to do this. It very rarely works that way. You know, I mean, I don't know of it ever working for me like that. I have to leave it and come back feeling like I've depleted everything, and then come back to it with a fresh look. And you know, you throw out a lot of stuff, and then you dig deeper.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean what you're saying there is very similar to a lot of projects that I've worked on. And that aha moment, or that spot just before twilight that you're talking about, I mean, I don't think that can necessarily happen after the first day that you've been grinding out ideas. I find that usually that's happening a week or two after you've sat on, and then your mind is all of a sudden open, because you've really, like you said, almost depleted what you feel as though you've depleted all the ideas.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It never happens in a planned methodical. I'm going to put 2 hours a day in here, 2 hours, and it gets done like that. It just doesn't. It's too amorphous, the process. I've always found, you know, and 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 sometimes, I mean, you reach a point because of the realities of our business, at least the way it used to be. You have a deadline. You were given 3 weeks to do this, and now you have a meeting scheduled 11 o'clock in the morning, and so what do? You pick your best shot, and you do something to present, and and several times on my way to that meeting, you know, why didn't I think about this? You know, and I've actually, I think I might tell you the story, but I've had to argue against a design that was already agreed upon to say, no, I have a better idea to do, you know, and but sometimes you just have to do that, you know, and when you can, otherwise you know, we all have a bag of old solutions that we might pull from, you know. I don't miss getting rid of the pressure of deadlines or working with large committees or board members. That was the most challenging, having to satisfy lots of different people that have diverse ideas, and some of them really incompatible with the way you think about a problem. You know? So anyway,
you say that the way you worded that was so nice.
sorry.
You worded that so politically, astutely. I mean, it was very, very nice of you. Just diverse ideas and potentially incompatible with the thought process that we approach the project.
You say they sucked. I mean, I had to bite my tongue so many times to say, you idiot. You know?
So, what are you currently working on?
Well, this goes back maybe 2 years ago when I originated it, but this, actually my cup, this vote symbol.
Excellent.
This came out of a mention by one of our woman, she was running for a state rep, and she was looking for some ways of getting the woman out to vote because she was running. And so I started just jotting down some ideas. Like all ideas, they come from sketches. And I did, I think 3 or 4. And in fact, here, this was one of them, but it's not really a logo, but it was a form of communication. And I just said, I thought it was fun to pick up on the bad, good vote. And then I kept on going, you know, like whenever I do something, actually quite often when you just give up on something but your mind still is working on it. And I did this sketch. I didn't think too much of it at the time. So I started with the woman's symbol, and then I said, you know, I started playing with letter forms, the V and the O, and I realized that the stem of the plus for the woman also was a T. So I used a lowercase e to make it complete. And I still didn't think of it. It was a little hand-done sketch. And Jan walked by. She said, "Oh my God, that's fantastic!" You know. So I said, "Well, let me see if I could formalize it." And so I started setting in a type, and then I realized, geez, this is so simple. And I think quite often I'm attracted to logos or forms that might have a double meaning. You know, there's 2 ideas. It's not like if you're selling pears, you could have a picture of a pear, but I like to do something where there's more than that to it. I mean, and I could go through many logos that I've done that have that quality. So that's what attracted me to this when I formalized it. is the idea that it says vote very clearly. It's a gestalt. It's not a normal way of saying vote, so it's interesting in that way, but it still reads as vote, and yet it has the feminine symbol. And then I did a logo for 2020 because it was such a tumultuous year. It was going to be a year, which is this, which reads as 2020, but you can see the issue. You know, it's like, which way is it going to go? And then we were asked by again, for doing so much work for Chester, we were asked by the Chester Public Library to do a new identity, and they actually had no identity. You know, how do you start? Start with sketches. You know, in doing these sketches, I always tried classic things like, you know, the building is really quite wonderful, and that was a good candidate. Another, you know, books, but we used here's the one using the building, and then we adapted. The squirrel has become kind of a mascot for Chester, and it came from the seal that I did way back in the 1970s for the town. And I used little squirrels, and then I took them off that seal and used them for 35 years for every Chester road race. And it became really like a mascot for Chester. We ended up using it on the entrance signs to Chester, silhouette cut out of metal. And Rotary Club used it on hats and shirts and so forth. So I started thinking about how maybe I could use that for the Chester Library in some way. And these were like some early sketches. Here's some other classic, I mean, just simple things. And this one led to the solution was this. Final, and it was adopted, and it's just fun. You know, you think of the children. We also just did an outline version of this, 8.5 by 11, with different quotes about books. Books are your best friends. About 10 different quotes, also open, and they're becoming like a coloring book. This was the design, and it's an H and it's a square. And I said, "Geez, that's one of the better designs that I've done, because the two words come together." But it went back into my, you know, lost file or unused logo file. And recently, Jesse asked me if I would collaborate with him and Justin on an urban renewal project in New London. And it was called Hodges Square. And age. So I went to my file and I found that thing that was done, you know, 25 years ago. No, this one didn't work either. So, but I did a version of using the same idea of Hodges Square. This was our presentation.
Right.
And we did signage. I mean, it was actually pretty impressive, the way we used it, you know. I'm waiting for another year to come up somewhere. Maybe I should go to an atlas of cities and say, hey, I have an idea.
Yes. That's a great idea.
Washington Square or whatever.
You had mentioned earlier the idea of having, you know, a dual meaning or a dual visual, sort of not hidden, but as part of the concept. So there's not just a singular thought. You know, you like to try to combine, you know, and you see it in that the the H square, um, even right there. Do you have any early influences that you think kind of made you interested in that type of a solution? Are there any designers that you could think of that you always like, oh wow, now I see what they, like when you were a young designer, that something sort of influenced you to think that way?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, so many mentors. I mean, Jesus, I mean, a lot of the Polish designers, the conceptual Polish designers were had that element, um, the double meaning, but also like Chemaev and Geismar had some of that. Um, I think if I really looked at all my influences, I probably could find some roots to that. But I don't think it's specific. I think generally, I think I like to give someone more. you know, I don't want to do. In fact, I'm suspect of myself if something comes too easy. So I have to work. It's really hard work to try to achieve that, you know. And I feel, and maybe it's some kind of a work ethic thing with me, you know. That the easy solutions are suspect. You know, it's like I'm taking the easy way out. You know,
Right.
I love even if something is finished. Sometimes I will still thinking. I will still think about it. I love thinking about it. You know, it's a form of enjoyment for me. Yeah. I mean, certainly you go back to the Whalers logo was certainly that. Um, the Connecticut River. Well, I could go through a bunch of them, but so that's a very good question, though. But I think of the influences. I mean, art. I mean, geez, even just going into art, the paintings and the painters and Picasso, Miro. I just go on, Leger, and then even the abstract expressionists, the layering of Rauschenberg. It all just melds together in this big soup. And then the typographers, the Swiss typographers and the clinical ones, and then the hand done roughness of Grapus, Pierre Bernard, and that group. So it's a big soup. I still love what I do. I still, I still love typography. I still love thinking about form. Um, but I feel that I do feel that I'm a part of a different time. I think I mentioned this before. I used to think that I could design anything when I was a young designer, that I could design anything. All I need is the is the platform or the requirements or the problem stated, and I could do it. But I don't feel that way anymore. I mean, I couldn't design a skateboard, for example. There's no way I could do that.
Do you ever think about like the personality of an organization as you're developing an identity?
Yeah, and um, more and more, I think there has to be something that's human about it. You know, uh, and you know, in spite of his clinical approach, Paul Rand always said every design should have a sense of humor. And I've thought about that a lot, and I truly believe that. I'm not whether it's a visceral sense of humor or an obvious sense of humor, but something that suggests that a human being did this. It was not generated by a computer. So I like to call it humanity. Because corporations are made up of people. People use the products. We're still human. And so I do think that's important.
I will challenge you. After you said you can't design a skateboard, I'm somehow gonna get you a skateboard, and you're gonna have to design it. It's gonna wind up in FedEx. You're gonna be like, what the heck is this box? And I'm gonna ask you to design something cool to put on it.
No one wants to have a Paul Rand skateboard, you know.
It won't be. I know. No, you won't go that way. You're gonna sit with that skateboard, and I know you're gonna come up with something amazing.
Okay, well, I'll accept the challenge, but I don't want to disappoint you.
You will never disappoint me.
Hey, how do I get out of this? Okay, Chris, you take care.
Bye.